The original school, Rosehill building, most of you have probably seen it, but if you haven't, this is the original Rosehill, absolutely beautiful old building. And Tootie Richter, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, she said her mother is right. Right? Right? So that's Tootie's mother. What we'd like to do, as I know, first of all, it'd be interesting to see a show of hands. How many of you, obviously, if you're here because you have a connection to Rosehill, but how many of you are not, have moved away and are not in Mukilteo but came back for this today? There's, okay, very, very good. Because I know I've talked to a couple of you already. What we're going to do is we want to try to capture some of those memories. You can do it up here in front. We got the cameras going. Understand if you don't like to speak in front of people. Clearly, I don't either. But we want to be able to capture those. And if you would feel more comfortable doing it really one-on-one with the camera, we can arrange that as well. But certainly for those who've tried to travel to come here to do that, we want to make sure we can capture yours. If we can't get to all of them today, we are going to set up some times available that you can come down and do that, because we want to capture as many of those as we can, okay? So whoever...
Well, my mother came to teach at the Rosehill School, the original one that burned, and as Joe has already told you, and it was during World War I, and my dad was in France, and when he came home, they met and fell in love and married. I came home from school. I lived in the house next to the liquor store. The liquor store was not there then, but I came home from school to have lunch, and I said, Mom, you know, I think I'll skip school tomorrow and go Christmas shopping. And she said, well, okay, but she said, if you get caught, take your licks. And that was always her rule. So I knew that I was on my own, but I went, and I had a great time. Well, I did get caught. Well, that meant that one of the teachers had to stay after school with me. And that wasn't very pleasant for them, you know, after a whole week. But anyway, the next day, I turned up after school, and it was Mr. Prigg who had to supervise me. So I said, do you want me to study, or what do you want me to do? He said, well, why don't you clean the boards? And I said, okay, so I cleaned the boards, and it didn't take very long. And I said, now what? He says, let's go home, Tootie. And I said, okay, and he knew I'd never tell, and I didn't. But I've always had a great spot in my heart for Mr. Prigg.
We are actually celebrating our sesquicentennial. It took me about a week to learn how to say that. But the sesquicentennial, the 150 years of Mukilteo. And we have tried to keep that rich history alive. We've actually worked quite a bit, if you notice down at Lighthouse Park, with the Native American tribes, which Mukilteo is named after. It's Native American for good camping place. And if you go down around the park, you'll see that we have a lot of the Native American art built into that. Even the new band shell is in the Salish design of that, and there will be more of that to come as well. And just like that was a good meeting place for the Native Americans, it continues to be Mukilteo, and it continues to be a great meeting place, and will off into the future. And I think we will all love and embrace the new building and another place that we can gather together, and because communities need that.
Joe and I had a heart-to-heart at the Mukilteo Lodge. And I found that he was a very enlightened mayor. And he also agreed, you know, from his own perspective, from his own family, we talked about his family, that really what's important in life is people, not buildings. So whereas I felt it would be wise to retain the building, certainly retaining the oral history of Mukilteo is by far and away the more important thing. And the mayor also felt very strongly about that. And that's why, at the mayor's request, we have Puget Sound Video with us today. Because no matter how passionate you may feel about today's meeting, that passion, that emotion will dissipate, and it will be gone, and it will not be shared. But through the archiving of oral history that's begun today, your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and people living 100 or 200 years from now can hear what happened in this room today.
It's really a thrill for me to be here, because my mother loved Mukilteo, and she loved all you people she had in class. She started here the year that the school burnt down, 28, and they put all the kids in the churches around to have the classes. And it's like Joe Marine said about how fast this school was rebuilt, or it wasn't rebuilt, but it's a new school. And I happened to be the school principal of Roosevelt School, which you talked about, the Soley family building this school, and it was part of the kind of the plan that in those days they followed. That was in 28 as well.
The one thing about the school was that the teachers were our neighbors, and they were at our house, and they knew us. And that was the wonderful thing. I'll give one example. One day my cat followed me to school. And Marion Fry saw it. Of course, she was little Dickens. So she took it and put it underneath her coat. And a teacher came along and tucked the tail in. And because I was, really shy, and I didn't like this, but nothing I can do. So I went in the room and sat down, and I kept saying, Marion, do something, do something. It's going to wet the floor. And finally she put it down, and I walked right over to Mr. Osborne. And he said, Thelma, isn't this your cat? And I said, yes. And he said, well, why don't we take it home?
Hail to our school so fair, we all our troubles share, and we fight with our might for the things we know to be right. And though we part, may we meet again. True bells of Rosehill, if you're for us, we'll sing the chorus over once again. Okay, let's hear it. Rah rah for Rosehill, Rosehill will win. Fight to the finish, never give in. Rah rah rah, you do your best, boys. We'll do the rest, boys. Rah rah for Rosehill School. Rah rah.